This is Living History Footnotes for the Hawk Lake log chute story. If you haven't seen the main episode yet, please check it out first. I will link it in the description. In today's episode, we're going to talk about a curious modern-day legacy of log chutes. We're going to talk about some other chutes that still exist to this day from the earlier era, and I'm going to tell you about an interesting presentation to get some more history on the logging industry. All that and more, so let's get into it. This week's featured comment comes from user The Shale Co, and they write, "That log chute in the first clip gives me so much nostalgia for the log flume ride at Ontario Place." Thank you very much for that comment, and you would be absolutely correct about that because the modern day log flume ride is actually inspired by the logging chutes of the industries of days gone by. As part of the research process for this episode, I read a lot of stories about how loggers were known to go down the slides either intentionally or sometimes accidentally, and that is largely an inspiration for where these log flumes came from, but it actually goes a little bit deeper than that. You'll remember the name Ruggles Wright from the main episode. He was the person in Ottawa who invented the timber slide, which was the first major slide for entire rafts of timber to go down around Chaudière Falls. Actually, side note, Chaudière Falls is a very important indigenous place that was basically destroyed by people building log chutes on top of it, and I believe in some cases blowing it up, but another story for another time. But anyways, let's go back to Ruggles Wright. The year was 1860, and the Prince of Wales was visiting the colonies of Canada. And one of the activities that the Prince agreed to do was to go for a slide down the Chaudière Falls timber slide as a passenger, just the way that some of the log drivers would do. This actually ended up becoming a big tradition for dignitaries and other major political figures that were visiting Canada, including the future King George V. actually took a ride down the Chaudière Falls log slide back in the days before he became king. Where is this snow coming from? Okay, distractions aside, yes, that's basically where the inspiration for those log flume theme park rides came from. So thank you very much again for that comment. Something I'd like to put on the record is that the log chute is not a purely Canadian invention. As part of the reading I did for this episode, I found records from Scandinavia in the 1700s where people were using wood to build structures to help move logs around natural obstacles like rapids and waterfalls. And they were actually controversial back then too, which is very interesting. I'm sure that they've been used in other parts of the world as well, but I quite frankly haven't spent a lot of time researching the broader history. Now, the falls at Chaudière Falls in Ottawa, where Ruggles Wright built that timber slide, might be a different story because it was a way of moving whole rafts of timber across that obstacle rather than just single logs. So that could be Canadian, but it was definitely inspired from travels around the world. With that said, though, there are actually a lot more original log chutes left than I previously thought. They're mainly in states of disrepair and kind of falling apart in the forests of northern Ontario, but there are quite a few still out there. That one abandoned chute that I showed you in the video is actually in the Sudbury area. And while we're on that subject, I want to give a special thanks to my friend Teresa, who is the one who actually told me that that log chute existed and was so accessible. A friend and colleague of mine has done a lot of exploring in the Crown land north of Sudbury, and he has come across several original style log chutes that are just decaying in the forests. However, he was unfortunately not able to grant me the permission to use that footage in my video. I unfortunately couldn't get myself out to some of those original chutes in the Crown land just because they're on some pretty gnarly forest service roads for the most part, and I didn't trust myself not to break my 16-year-old Mazda 3, so you're welcome, car. Another friend of mine named Backroads Bill actually did a bit of a story on some of these log chutes earlier this year, and it's an interesting look at some steel chutes, which are, of course, very much still around to this day, even though they've been long since abandoned. I recommend you check out his story, and I've linked it in the description. I did a lot of reading for this story because it's complicated and nuanced, and I wanted to make sure that I was telling the best version possible. And one of the resources that I found incredibly helpful was a presentation by somebody named John Savage. He put together a story called War of the Woods, and it was a talk for the Orillia Museum of Art and History. It's all about the complicated nature of the logging industry and especially how it impacted First Nations, and John himself has ties to Rama First Nation. It's a really interesting watch or even just a listen, and I've linked it in the description. I really recommend you check it out, and my thanks to John for chatting with me a bit about his project. I used a fair bit of information from his talk in the actual main episode, but it is still seriously an excellent presentation and you should go check it out now. Sudbury is so beautiful. I had no idea how much I was going to be enjoying the history of log chutes, especially the fact that they span all across the planet. I could be out here probably for hours talking to you about this incredible part of our history, but my notes are pretty much already useless, so I think this is as good a time as any to say that is it for this week's episode of Living History Footnotes about the Hawk Lake log chute story. As always, I encourage you to visit these places for yourself. You know what I'm going to say here. When you visit, be sure to take a photo, tag me on Instagram. I'm at LivingHistoryCA, and use hashtag LivingHistoryCA as well, just so I have a better chance of seeing it. Next week, I've got a brand new episode of Living History coming your way. We're going down to southern Ontario for an interesting look at how humankind accidentally created a wasteland, but then people started destroying it all over again. Until then, be well.